Welcome to the nonprofit chat tonight. And we have a really good topic tonight. And I'm going to ask my co-host on these has been Russell David Dennis. I'm Hugh McPherson-Ballou. We have a good time on these, and we introduce great things to the world by introducing great people who have great products and services. And a longtime friend of ours tonight is Penny Zenker. And Russ is carrying the heavy weight tonight. I'm waiting in an airport to board a plane. So I'll be a passive participant in this. So we're recording on the cloud, and this is going to be part of our Nonprofit Exchange podcast, Penny. So this nonprofit chat is something we broadcast out to folks every Tuesday at 7. So Russell, would you cue up the introduction, and let Penny talk about herself a little bit as well.
Thank you, Hugh, and welcome, Penny. It's always a pleasure to see you. It's been a good while. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have Penny Zenker, and Penny is a strategic business coach and trainer for boosting productivity, and she coaches business leaders and entrepreneurs. She's authored the best-selling book, The Productivity Zone, Stop the Tug of War with Time. Penny leverages her personal experiences of building up and later selling a multi-million-dollar business as a senior executive at one of the world's largest market research companies, and working with business leaders all over the world as a Tony Robbins business coach. Penny's proven and practical approaches will help people get results quickly. And time is something that is just difficult to get more of. It's the one thing we can't get more of. Penny, tell everybody about yourself today. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Russell. And Hugh, always good to be here with you guys. Thank you for having me here. And, as you kind of queued it up, where some of my experience and background is, Hugh earlier, he said, well, how are you qualified? What makes you the time management expert or productivity expert? And maybe it's because I have more challenges than most people. I don't know. No, it's really, as you heard in the introduction, is I started my own technology business back when I was 25. And, nobody knows better about time management challenges than an entrepreneur, starting off in their business, wearing all the different hats and playing so many different roles. So, I've seen it from an entrepreneur's perspective. And then I went to work for a big company, organized very differently. But at the same time, I thought when I left my company and I sold it, I thought, now I'm going to go work 9 to 5. It's going to be so easy. I'm going to take over this role. And that's not what it was at all, right? I ended up taking over, instead of being the CTO of the organization, I ended up taking my boss's job in a reorganization. And then I was responsible for multiple countries speaking in a foreign language and reorganizing the organization. So I was like, I've never experienced such a challenge of, which isn't time, but at that moment, I thought it was a time management challenge. How can I do all this? And what I'd love to just briefly share is, a story that kind of shifted the way I thought about time management forever. And hopefully some of our discussion today will really be around that. And when I took over this position at the market research company, and I was overwhelmed and overloaded, and I was questioning myself whether I even had the skills or what was needed to do this job, because it was just so much different and so much bigger than what I had ever had before. And, it's when we get overwhelmed, we think we're overloaded, but we're really just overwhelmed. And there's a difference between that, because one has to do with mental capacity, where the other one is really more of a time capacity issue or physical capacity. So I went into my boss's office and I said, Peter, I can't do this. I don't think that I'm the right person for this position. And, went and shared with him where my challenges were. And he sat there patiently, like a cool leader, listening. And then he said, listen, He said, I hired you to make decisions. And what you do with the rest of your time is up to you.
Oh,
Think about that.
That's profound.
It
Wow.
was, right? At the first, my reaction was, well, easy for you to say. But I thought about that, and it was so simple. And as you said, Hugh, so profound that it really made me rethink the way that I looked at everything, because it's true. And it shifted my mindset from that point forward to be much more of a strategic thinker than a tactical thinker. Because when we're time management, then we're tactically thinking. And we need to pull ourselves away and just think more strategically. Go ahead, Hugh.
I want to interject in here. Russell, I made you host, and you can kick off the Facebook broadcast now, and then we can get more people live on this. And Penny, I wanted people to hear some of what you're saying. That, you know, the people that are in leadership positions have tremendous impact. And what the person said to you, I pay you to make decisions. That is amazing. So Russ, are we live on Facebook yet?
I just clicked on it. It looks like, let's try
Yes,
that.
sir. Yes, sir. So Penny, we're out there into the world, and Penny was talking about her journey of being able to think strategically. And Penny, that was pretty profound. Just to take it a little more, and then we'll get into some of the substance we want to talk about tonight.
Yeah, so as I said, that was kind of the basis of me shifting my thinking around time. And then as I got further into that organization, I was able to work with people in various different divisions of that organization. And then I went to work with Tony Robbins as a strategic business coach for his organization. And I worked with people all over the world and really helped them to, I think you said it, Russ, earlier, you said, get out of your own way, right? I help them to get out of their own way, because if cash flow is the #1 reason why businesses go out of business, really help them to, I think you said it, Russ, earlier, you said, get out of a double play here. I help them to get out of their own way, because if cash flow is the #1 reason why businesses go out of business, really help them to, I think you said, we've got a double play here. I help them to get out of their own way, because if cash flow is the #1 reason why businesses go out of business, I can't hear you, Hugh. Are you still there, Russ?
Yes.
Okay.
We got to mute the Facebook page.
Okay, I've got to get to.
Cash flow is the #1 reason.
We're broadcasting live on Facebook, so it's
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
coming back at us.
There we go.
So say that
yes,
last bit again, if you will, Penny.
Definitely. So as I started to work with Tony Robbins as a strategic business coach there, you know, our goal was to help companies to grow their businesses, right? Double their business and really to grow exponentially. And if businesses, they say that the #1 reason why businesses go out of business is cash flow. Well, the #2 reason has to be because of their time management, because they'd have the cash flow if they managed their time and thought more strategically about what they needed to do. So I found myself, it didn't matter whether it was what culture, what country, I found myself working on the same set of skills first and foremost with people all over the world to help them to manage the way that they think around time management and where they focus and how they prioritize, and get them to think more strategically about what they're doing as opposed to tactically. And then we could implement the strategies and things like that. But it's really about shifting that perspective around time and being more of a strategic thinker around that than a tactical thinker.
Hey, hold up your book. You held it up before people joined us here. What is that about? What is the productivity zone? Stop the tug of war with time. We used that for our teaser when we sent out email today.
Yeah, I saw that. No, it's great. It's you know, I think it's the common struggle that people feel is, you know, I wish I just had more time. It's that tug of war with time. And so what I did is all of the people that I've worked with, you know, around the world, is I thought, well, how can I bring this to a larger number of people than just those few people, you know, that I've been able to work with one-on-one? I really want to make a much bigger impact. And so the way to do that is through, you know, either written word, or I do a video series I also have a piece of software that goes with this, and it really describes what I call the productivity zone. And when you're in the zone, you're focused on 10 core drivers that help you to think and act more strategically. Like I said about, you know, the decision-making aspect is what are the aspects that go into having us be more strategic about how we show up for our time. And it goes into, there's a framework for the productivity zone. So what's in the zone is these 10 drivers, and what's out of the zone is perfectionism and procrastination. So we were talking earlier, Russ, before the show started about that's where resistance is. That's where we create resistance through procrastination, because mentally we're not interested, we're not clear what we want to do, we're not motivated, we're not, we're afraid of what's on the other side. So we have all these resistance that sits outside, and that's where the stress is.
Yeah. Stress? We're entrepreneurs. We don't have stress. So Penny, Russ is written and writing books. I've written books. My first book, I outlined it, and then I started on the chapter getting things done. It was basically what you're talking about, that whole space. How do you put a plan down and make sure it happens? So once I wrote it, it really helped me do the rest of the book. And it really gave me this sense of accountability. Okay, Baloo, you said it. Now you got to do it. So writing the book and thinking about, you got to be productive. You got to plan it. You got to make use of the time that's available. Was there a learning experience for you in going through that writing the book process?
Yeah, there were a lot of learning experiences, as I'm sure you guys have had too. But, you know, some of the things that helped me were some of the principles that I use in the book. So, for instance, the number one principle is to understand how to motivate yourself, and to, you know, to be in the right space of motivation, so that, you know, when you're really motivated, everything else disappears and you get things done. So one of the things that I did first was I created the cover of my book, like way before the whole thing, it wasn't even started yet, and I had the cover so that I was motivated to see it's already done, right? It's just filling in the pages. So that really motivated me to, and inspired me as I saw it up on my desk, and I'd see it, you know, and know that it was just about filling it in. It's also you know, mine came pretty easily structured, as you said. Once you have an outline, right? And because I'm talking about the 10 drivers, it was pretty easy because each driver was then a chapter. So as soon as I had that, it was clear, and then how I wanted to format it, right? So I wanted to have a few call outs. I wanted to have a summary at the end so that people could have like the top 3 takeaways at the end of each chapter. And I wanted to have a personal story in the beginning of each chapter. So once I defined kind of the outline and that kind of format, it was really easy to put things in. Easier than people think, especially today with the whole dictate. I don't know if you guys use that, but I love that function.
Oh yeah, I love Siri. I think I sleep with her. She understands me and fixes my Southern, makes it into real language. So you've talked about your 10. I'm asking some of the front questions because Russ is going to do some of the heavy lifting after I go through security here at the airport. But what are those 10? Can you outline those? And then sure. I know Russ knows you, and he's done some research, and he has some pretty profound questions to lay on you. And then we've also got some questions that you and I devised a while back that are launching out there on Facebook and Twitter for people to respond to. And we'll talk about those during the interview. So great. What are those 10 PZ? That's your initials.
I know, isn't that funny? I just found that out afterwards, like the productivity zone in PZ, right?
Yeah, love it. Unconscious titling. Yes.
So what are those 10?
So the 10 are I'll go through them real quickly, and obviously there's more meat below it. And it's in the key is in understanding how to twist them and make them work for you in the moment. So number 1 is motivation. Number 2 is self-talk. Number 3 is focus. And number 4 is physiology or self-care. And I'm going to do them in blocks because those 4 together, they make up what I call championship psychology. It's where we manage our energy. And that's really the determination of what really you get done in that time, it's because it's how you show up for that time. So that's those 4 initial core drivers is about how we manage our energy and our psychology. Then we go into winning strategies. And that's, like you said, Hugh, it's the planning, right? It's getting that outline together and things. It's the process, creating systems, automating things, and then prioritization, knowing what comes first, what's important. And then we get into what makes it sustainable, right? Because now that we have our approach, we have our psychology, we have our approach, now we need to know what do we need to do to keep this going. And so that would be progress is the next one, is understanding the measurement, what it is that we're measuring. And then lastly is being proactive and staying ahead of the curve. So I know that's like a total quick run through, and maybe we'll touch upon a few more in detail. Obviously, there's another resource if people want it. I go into, there's a chapter for each one of those in the book, and also software that goes along with that. I think Hugh's talking.
He's got to
I had muted myself because there was background noise. We have people joining us on Facebook, and we have people also joining us on the webcast. So I don't feel too bad about having some technical problems. I watched Frank Kern do one of his webinars for thousands of people, and they had a few snafus today. So, it happens. We're talking to Penny Zenker, author of Productivity Zone. Hold up your book again. I like that cover. It says the Productivity Zone.
Right.
Stop the tug of war with time. I love it when people say they're going to manage time. You can't manage time. It's going to go by anyway. So what are we managing?
Well, we're managing those 3 elements, right? We're managing our energy, and is what I say mostly, is because it's how we show up for the time. I mean, let's face it, most people, they know what to do, they just don't do it, right? That's why we get into that procrastination or perfectionism, is there's that resistance, there's something else going on there, and that's all up here. So, that's the biggest thing.
Oh my word, it's the mental trap. Yeah,
it is.
We have David Gruder next week. Dr. Gruder is going to talk more about our mind. We had a chat with him a couple of months ago, and it was about the shadow inside. So there's lots of synergies with what you're talking about, and actually what several of our presenters have talked about. But what you're presenting is a really good system. Wow. So we don't sell things on the show, but if people wanted the book, where would they find it?
So I'm available on Amazon, so they can get it on Amazon. Just either look up the Productivity Zone or Penny Zenker, and they can find it there. And there's a link that I can put up if anybody's interested in taking the assessment, which enables them to get a piece of software that helps them to actually rate themselves and do some self-coaching, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and set some actions around these 10 core drivers too.
Love it, love it. So if you'll put send that to Russell and I, we will put that in the notes for the nonprofit chat, and we'll put it in the notes for the podcast.
Great, we'll do.
We're pushing 15,000 listeners on the podcast now. So somebody likes what we're doing. We want to make sure people have access to what you mentioned here. So any links that you mentioned, make sure that we have them. So Russell, I know you're itching to get in here. Well, I'm gonna go through the security while you guys are doing the next bit, and I'll see you on the other side.
Outstanding. So yes, I'm looking through this. I am now the owner of your book.
Oh, thank you. That quickly, you're like online buying it.
Technology it's good for consuming things, not necessarily good for the checking account, because the impulse is there. So, but I love the idea of making sure that you look at time, and a lot of people, they sort of look at it as an enemy. And I've heard a little saying that says time is a gift, not the enemy.
Right. That's a really good statement.
Yeah. So we can get into some of the questions that we have for the week. And our first question is, what's the biggest time vampire of your life?
Right. So, I want everybody to think about this question and answer it for themselves. And And hopefully for those who are joining us on Facebook and whatnot, post what it is, right? Get really clear on what the biggest time vampire is and get clear on what it is. So for me, my biggest time vampire is, is my kids. And, I love them. And of course I want to be flexible to be there, but, they miss the bus and then I've got to drive them to school. And then whatever I have planned is out the door or, whatever, or I have to pick them up from school because they missed the bus, or we've got soccer practice and I've got to do a lot of organization to get them where they need to go and things like that. So, and things pop up all the time, somebody's sick or, I'll include the dog in that, right? The dog has a problem and I got to take care of that. So we all have time vampires. And what that means to me is something that we can or can't control, right? Because there are things outside of our control that happen that take our time up. Like, but we also have to think about which part of it is within our control.
Okay.
Right? Because there's a piece of it that we can anticipate what kinds of things could come up, and then we can set things in place, be proactive so that we don't have that. So if I were in the morning to make sure I wake my kids up an extra 15 minutes early, then I can avoid most of the challenges of them being late, unless it's a real exception, right? So I want people to take ownership of the time vampires. It's like that person that calls, and every time that person calls that they want to talk to you for an hour, right?
Yeah.
So you can allow that person to be that time vampire because you don't have an hour to give them, or you can say, hey, what's up? I only have 10 minutes. What's up? And then if you qualify yourself in the beginning, not in a rude way, but in a good way, love to talk to you. That's why I picked up, but I only have a couple minutes. What's up? So when you do things like that, then you can help to mitigate, those time vampires.
Yeah, and I think that can create conflicts for people because they say, well, what if something happens that's out of my control? And and it's in here. It's part of the process. We're talking about planning, and that involves making contingencies. You have to have a contingency plan. And, entrepreneurs, we're eternal optimists. So, everything usually takes 2 to 3 times more time, money, and effort than we plan for, because we plan for everything to go well. So I think that's a pretty common trap.
What's your vampire? What's your vampire, Russ?
Oh, well, my vampire, I suffer from what I call S to the third power, S cubed. Shiny stuff syndrome. and I have to be very careful. I do a lot of communicating online, and I can find myself in social media, in mail, a whole lot because I'm writing, I'm posting, I'm responding to people, and sometimes I have writing to do and other projects, and I need to back out of that so that I can prepare for my meetings with clients and other things. And that can be a real vampire, whether it's social media or email. And I have to and there are apps out there that you can get that will squawk at you or tell you to get out of there.
Right.
So that you don't get stuck in social media or in other things. So it's really easy to get stuck in the activities that don't produce revenue or produce results. So those are. With the coaching for you, I know you work with a lot of different people. What are some of the more common vampires that people you work with talk about?
Well, one of them you just mentioned, right? Social media is a really big one. Different types of office distractions are what people talk about, like these open office environments that now the studies have just come out to show that they really are killing our productivity. And that's why people would prefer to work at home, because they get stuff done at home. So, often when I go in and do workshops in organizations, it's something that they won't talk about with each other, but in a safe space around these drivers, they're able to talk about the distractions of, hey, my desk is closer to the kitchen area. And so everybody stops to talk to them at their desk. And so they don't get stuff done. And so, there's those common things. There's the telephone ringing. People say a lot when they're you know, that they pick up their phone because it might be a client. So they're constantly, you know, binging with their emails and different things like that that are interrupting them.
Yeah.
So depending on the office environment, right, there are a ton of different ways that our time can be, you know, taken.
Yeah, well, it's very easy. Yeah, so with me, there are just times I have to turn the telephone off or let voicemail pick up. It's not going to explode on my desk
Right.
if I don't pick it up. And so for the most critical things, I think it's important to focus on those. And productivity zone, that's everybody's productivity zone. Is that a moving target? Is that different for everybody?
Well, yeah, it is, because we're not machines, right? So, you know, we're not going to be calculated how productive we are by widgets. Part of it is not that we produced 10 widgets and then we had a productive day, and anything more than that, you know, we need to be able to feel in control. So when we feel stressed, then you're not in the zone, right?
Okay.
You need to have some semblance of feeling like you're in control and that you've got, you know, I don't like the word balance.
Okay.
Because, you know, what does that mean? It's like a plane that's, you know, 90% of the time it's correcting all the time, right? It's never really on path. So, you know, maybe it's being in harmony.
Okay.
Right? And being able to feel good about what you've accomplished and knowing that you're moving forward on those things that are most important. So, but the key thing about the zone is that you can use any of these core drivers to get back in the zone, right? When you get distracted, you have one of those vampires, like you said, you could just, you know, turn off your social media. Well, some people aren't doing that. So by being more conscious of what helps you to be more productive, and then putting things in place to support you, you know, for example, I go to a personal trainer because I know I won't go otherwise. So I want to be healthy. I want to stay fit and strong. And I know that it's important to my energy levels and to my whole productivity.
Yeah.
So I have to force myself by paying somebody to go and work with them.
Yeah.
And that's just the way that it is, right? So we've got to put things in place where we know that we're not living up to, you know, and reaching the things that we want to reach. So if we're not able to do it for ourselves, then we need to put something else in place, a system, get some other form of accountability to help us.
Oh, accountability is where it's at, that's for sure. I have an accountability coach that I speak with every week, and that's been marvelous for me. And there's other people here. I've got my office mates here, and we kind of keep each other on task with different projects. So
Right.
accountability is huge for helping stay productive.
Absolutely. And that's why I created that software, is because not everybody can afford a coach, you know, and I realized that having a coach in some instances can be outside of people's budget. So I wanted to have something that would give them some accountability, that they could come back to the tool on a weekly basis to assess where they are and get that coaching and act as that accountability, because it is key.
Penny, our primary audience here are clergy, nonprofit executive directors, and many of them work on a very limited budget. And so that would be a real important gift for them. So you're going to give us the link for that
Yes.
tool. And I've been, you've been to my workshop in Philly, and Russell's been to 2 of them, and you both presented. You know, it's great when you have people present and they do better than you do in your own workshop. So I feel really fortunate having you 2 guys around me. So in that workshop, if you remember, I asked people what their topics are they wanted to deal with most, and the number 1 in every location was leader burnout. And I think that's due to the things we're talking about. It's not really having it structured. It's not really managing. I ask about managing time, which we don't. We manage ourselves. So I think,
Right.
So speak about, you know, how the anxiety and how this stuff going unbridled, not having accountability, not having a plan, not being productive. How does that contribute to us being burned out?
Well, so burnout is the ultimate of stress outside of the zone, right? And it's gotten to a point where, you know, you just, you're not doing anything about it, and you're just going on until it's like it's a stacking effect, right? And then it gets to the point where physically, you know, some people have adrenaline then issues because they really burn out in the context of mentally and physically. And so I believe that the things that are most important is for them to recognize, and here's the challenge is most people say, I don't have the time. And so they don't have the time to invest in making sure that they're getting enough exercise and moving their body. They don't have enough time to get enough sleep. They don't have enough time to, you know, for these different things. So they just keep going like the Energizer Bunny until they burn out. So the key thing is to take a step back as soon as possible on a regular basis and say what's working and what's not working. And where must I make the time? Again, I go to a trainer because I must make that time because I know that it's going to feed my energy and everything else. But I know that my brain is like everyone else's that says, I don't have the time for that. I've got projects that I need to get forward on. I need, you know, and these people in these non-for-profits, right? They have a big responsibility and a big passion. And so sometimes that passion can burn you out because you don't have harmony with the rest of the areas in your life. And so it's taking a step back and getting that strategic, holistic look at what's going on so that they can focus their time and energy in the right places.
All right.
You know, one other quick thing is a good question for those people to ask themselves. And so if you're on and you're feeling that way, is what's it costing you? Right? Is getting clear, because sometimes we just keep going, but if they really think about what it's costing them, you know, it may be costing them volunteers and people on the team because they're not able to communicate properly, right? They're not able to lead their team anymore when they're in that stressful state because that energy is transferred, right? So they might be losing possible funding. They might be destroying their relationships with their family. If they think about any of us, if we think about what it's costing us, then it can create some greater motivation. We're 100 times more motivated by pain sometimes than we are by pleasure.
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
to connect to that and understand this is, you know, how this is not serving them, and then it'll create some action.
Well, and that is, and Russ, maybe you get this too. I hear that often. Well, I don't have time to write goals. I don't have time to make a plan.
Right.
Well, so you got time to do it over. You got time to really upset your whole board and your staff because you're not moving in a step forward manner, and they don't know where to play. So I think and I would classify that as an excuse, not a reason.
Absolutely. And the excuse comes from a fear or, right? I tell people all the time, write down all the excuses, why and where you're procrastinating, and everything around perfectionism too. Why are you working it, you know, to death and so forth? What are your excuses? Love that, right? Shine a light on those excuses so you can see what it really means.
I'm going to be a procrastinator if I ever get around to it.
You know, that kind of brings us to that second question. That second question is, what do you procrastinate around? One of my kryptonite is the telephone. I need more phone conversations because I talk to people one-on-one. When I talk to them, that's how I get to know them, see what they're doing, and I can set some time to make some sales calls, and I find myself doing other things, whether it's a broadcast or writing something, and it's really important. My friend Susie Pruden likes to say the money's in the telephone. And so what are some things that you procrastinated around, and other things that a lot of the people that you work with find themselves procrastinating around?
Right. Isn't it funny how we procrastinate on the things that are most important? So people find this hard to believe about me, but you know, I do a lot of public speaking, And one of the things I procrastinate on is preparing for my speeches. And I don't mean like structuring out the slides or anything like that. It's the actual preparation. So recently I did a TEDx for Penn State in Erie, and that was the hardest thing for me, was to set aside time to practice. I kept finding other things to do instead of practicing. And then I have to go back to that accountability, and I had to invite people to my house. Like I had to burn the boats. I had to do things that meant that I had no way out. Like people were coming and I had to practice.
Yeah.
So I think it's, you know, I see a lot of people procrastinating on sales calls because of fear of rejection, because they don't see themselves as a salesperson, or they, you know, they feel like if asking for referrals, they procrastinate on because they feel like people will, if they appreciate my service, they'll just give me the referral. And, you know, and it's just not true. People are just too busy to think about you. So you have to remind them.
Yeah, that's true. I'm my own favorite subject. I'm not much, but I'm all I think about.
Right. And administration and paperwork, that's a big thing people love to procrastinate on, is anything that requires organization, cleaning their desk, or, you know, I email, getting through their email. I have had CEOs that tell me that they have like 5,000 unread emails in their inbox. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Or there's someone else who told me that they had voicemails. They had 200 voicemails.
Wow.
Like, okay, like, you know.
I don't think I'll tell you how many emails I have. I mean,
Unread?
I segregate the spam, and I just don't go there.
Well, that's different. If it's spam, that's something else, right? You can filter things into different places, but this was in their inbox, right? The first thing that you do is take everything that comes into your inbox and you filter out all that spam, and only good quality content comes to your inbox.
Rarely.
So,
I think the wisdom is being able to set some priorities on all of that. Excuse me, Russ, interrupted you.
Oh yeah, well yeah. As far as that email box goes, I have to clean out the spam first and quickly, and so that I can scan through for the important things.
Right.
And, so filing it, I don't always get to file it, but I go through that inbox with the most current stuff and get it out of there. I do that at night before I go to bed sometimes, because I get a lot. It's just like delete, 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 unsubscribe, unsubscribe, unsubscribe.
Right.
Even when you sign up for a free report or some valuable information, what happens is those folks email you every day. So.
Oh gosh. So Russ,
Yeah, well, there's some good systems out there that help you to, you know, to remove those. So good to do some research.
I'd love to talk about that. That's email is, you know, we keep adding things. Remember, we added email, we add text, we add cell phone. We just keep adding things, but we don't take anything away.
That's true.
Are we up to our third question yet? That's the half-hour question just posted.
Yeah, we are. So Penny, how do you prioritize your work? And another portion of that is, how do you define what's urgent? Because I think a lot of people, I have trouble with that. Sometimes I have to back up and look at what's most important and take things off the list.
Totally. That, I find that that's one of the biggest challenges that people have. I'm pretty good at that myself, but I find that a lot of people, and I think it's the nature of an entrepreneur. Like we are born with a certain sense of urgency, and it's like a gift and a curse at the same time, right? So, you know, we have to respond quickly because that's just in our nature. So we, you know, a potential client calls, we've got to get back to them, you know, and it takes real discipline to be able to really define and say what is really urgent. Like, is it really urgent that I get back to this person, or that I check my email, you know, I forget what the latest statistic is, 130 times a day or something like that. It's ridiculous. Don't quote me on that, but the number is a ridiculous number of how many times people check their email. And so, you know, so it's planning and priority. You know, a lot of these drivers, they're intertwined. I pull them apart so we can get some awareness out of them. But, you know, in setting priority, we need to understand that balance between what's important. And to me, what's important is strategic, right? I brought that up in the very beginning, is that my whole mindset works around what's strategic and how we can think and act more strategically. Thank you, Peter Hoffer, for that. My mentor who taught me that. And so I'm always thinking, is this going to further my most important goals? And that's how I stay, you know, and I try to do those things first, is I'm very clear on my list of what needs to be done to do those things that are most important. That means long-term strategy. It's going to be my multiplier. I call it having the multiplier mindset, so that I know that I'm working on my multiplier.
Okay.
And then to be able to look at those things that are, you know, urgent but not as important, as to how do you handle those, and how do you, you know, can you delegate some of those? Can you automate some of those things? Can you be proactive so that they don't show up anymore?
Penny, comment on two things. There's a little book by Hummel called The Tyranny of the Urgent. Do you know that book?
I don't know that book, but it sounds good.
It's a little, you can get it on Amazon. I think sometimes you get it free. The Tyranny of the Urgent by Hummel, Hummel.
Okay.
The other one is Covey talks about the quadrants: important,
yes.
Urgent, not important, not urgent, and how we segment our work. And if we ignore stuff, then the not important becomes urgent, and there's the tyranny.
Yes. Yes. And you know, so that's the Covey matrix is I think it's called the Eisenhower matrix. And I like to have people use that to build awareness as to what they're doing throughout the day. So if they took that matrix and they just identified at the end of the day, what percentage of your day did you spend in each quadrant, right? It gives you some really good awareness. And as you start to build your task list, you could also kind of look at those quadrants. Which of those things are from the important quadrant, and which of those things are in the urgent quadrant, and so forth, right? And so it just gives you a greater awareness. It's almost like, you know, how people are asked to do a food diary because they need to get greater awareness as to what they're eating. And because most people just, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, right? Well, I know what I'm eating, but when you have to write it down, it gives you a certain level of clarity that's very different from just having it in your head. Then you're like, oh my goodness, I only had 1 glass of water the whole day and I'm supposed to have, you know, 8. Or, wow, did I really have, you know, 5 chocolate chip cookies and that, you know, carrot cake and, you know, oh, I thought that was yesterday. No, that's today. Did I really have 8 cups of coffee? Oh no, I did. You know, so when you have to write it down, it's a rude awakening. And it's the same thing. If you look and you really log what you're doing with your time, it's a rude awakening. And I've had, you know, some really big ahas with people in working with them and having them see that, so that they could very clearly from that point decide, well, okay, what can I delegate, that they could clean the situation up, but they've got to recognize it fully first.
Absolutely. And one of, I forget which book it was in, but in one of John Maxwell's books, he says he sits down in his thinking chair at the end of every day, and he spends 15 minutes looking at his day and looking where the time got lost, and making notes. What can I do better?
Right.
And you know, there's affirmations, but there's also corrections. What could I do better? And I suggest that clients I work with have a similar pattern. We do what we call daily valuable deliverables, something we do every day. That's the baby steps that lead us toward our bigger plan. So it's a daily discipline. But I'm of the opinion that we learn from ourselves and we develop good habits. And you've referred to some of these things during this interview, but it's like writing down what you eat. We are what we eat, but we are what we think, and we are what we do.
Yep.
So that's a really good idea. Write it down and look at it. Well, it's the same discipline as writing down your food. And if you know why you feel bad, well, it might be what you ate, but it might also be how you created some stress in your stomach because you didn't plan your day and then work your plan.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Am I rambling, or am I hearing what you're saying?
Absolutely. You are picking up what I'm putting down. Yes.
You know, that writing things down, it's all a question of accountability. Once you have it on paper, it's real. And talking, saying things to my accountability coach just adds to that. And you know what surprises me is how much better some things sound in my head than they do when I'm telling somebody else or writing them down.
Oh yeah. Well, and we can lie to ourselves when it's in our head. When we get it on paper, then it's hard to lie to ourselves, right? And so that's why I like to have people get it on paper. There's another exercise that I have people do around distractions, the same type of thing, because the reason we're not getting to what's important is all these excuses and distractions. So I have them track their distractions and categorize them. And I'd be happy to give that. I have a link that people could go to download that worksheet. If you know, if you want me to, I can put it in the chat and people can
Oh
take
yeah,
it.
absolutely,
Oh, yeah,
absolutely. That's a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I need for my S to the third power, shiny stuff syndrome.
Right. And here's the thing: is most people they'll download the sheet, and you know you're probably one of them, whoever you are out there, and you won't do anything with it, right? You won't actually take the time, the few minutes that it takes to write things down. And so that's why we don't get results, is because we don't have the discipline to even use the tools, right? We don't have the mental capacity to even use the tools that we're given. So that's why it comes back to the mental side, is why is it important? Like, get connected to how much more you could do, how much more relaxed you would be if you could just remove some of these things.
Oh, well, wait, Penny, when you do that, you find out that you have more free time because you've really put things in order and you've eliminated the stuff that you shouldn't be doing.
Right. How awesome is that, right?
You know, Penny, one of the things in what you were saying, one of the things I noticed about myself over the years, I would find myself grabbing more things, learning more things, and as I got overwhelmed, I'd pick up this tool or that tool, and there's remarkable stuff out there. Next thing you know, I've got all of these tools, and I'm sitting there trying to think, how am I going to juggle things, manage them, make them work? I'm overwhelmed because I've got this pile of tools, and my productivity is not where I want it to be, and I'm getting more and more tools. I'm getting more and more stressed. How common is that, or am I just so wacky that I'm on my own planet?
No, you're like everyone, right? We're all like, the more, I think you said it, it keeps being more and more and more, and nothing's going away. And it's comes back to discipline, right? Of just saying, you know, that you've got to, I don't like to use a ton of tools because of the same reason, is it's just, there's too much. So, you know, we have to get away from the, oh, I need a new tool because that will fix everything, because we think that a new tool will fix everything. And all it does is start us back over. And then 2 months later, we say, you know what, this isn't working. I need a new tool. All the tools work. All the tools work. I guarantee you, it doesn't matter what tool it is. If you use it consistently, it will work. It might not be perfect, but it will work.
I have a tool called a pen and paper.
So I would say go through your tools and remove most of them, and just, you know, it reminds me actually really awesome of an IT group that I was working with, and they wanted to bring in this document management system. And so it was all about choosing the tools. And I said, hold on a second. I said, if we're going to put in a new document management system, how are we going to use it first? Like, let's think strategically about how we're going to organize ourselves versus what are the, you know, the bells and whistles of the system that doesn't matter. And so I think that's what we need to get back to, is take a step back, is what do we really need to run our business? What is it that we're looking to do? And then what are the options available, and to choose one of those tools and be committed enough to it to follow it through.
That's real discipline. That's real discipline. I'm on the last roundup here, the last few minutes of our interview. I'm going to let Russell take us out. I'm going to board a plane to go to CEO Space in Florida, where it's not raining today. So, Penny, this has been awesome stuff, and Russell will take us to the end. Thank you, Russell.
Thanks. You have a good trip. Give everybody my best down there.
Me too.
And let them know that they're in my thoughts. So that's really important. It's just getting down and using a tool that's going to work. And, you know, a part of how I accumulated tools is because I have a specific set of things that I like
Uh-huh.
Evernote. I use Evernote. I do everything in Evernote. Funny enough, it was a tool that Hugh introduced me to.
Uh-huh. I like Evernote too.
Yeah, but I have clients that use the Microsoft suite. They use Google, and they don't want to do anything different. So that's a part of how I got the tools, got a pile of tools. So that doesn't always work, but I stick to Evernote. That's really my go-to. And even if I'm using their platform, I organize things in Evernote so that I can find them.
Perfect, right? So then you had the system that works for you.
I have what works for me, yeah, and I love this. I wish I could convince everybody that I'm right and they should use mine, but that's crazy. Everybody works a little differently.
Right. Everybody does. And so there are different tools that are going to be better for some and other tools that are going to be better for others.
Yeah, and so yeah. So our fourth question, you know, and you mentioned it very early in the show, but I'd like to spend a little bit time on talking about the difference between being overwhelmed and overloaded, and how we can separate those and manage each one.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, the thing is that most people think that they're overloaded. And so they get to this thing where they think, oh, I'm at capacity and I can't take on any more. You know, and I even hear myself sometimes I'm saying it, I don't have the time or I can't do that. The truth is that I'm not being resourceful enough to find ways to make it happen. So either the motivation isn't high enough or I have some kind of a fear of what it's going to take away from me. And so I get overwhelmed with all the things I have to think about.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times what I'm working with people around is how to help them get out of overwhelm,
Okay.
right? Is to make a plan, is that you don't have to keep everything in your head, right? Going back to how you prioritize things and understanding, because people get stuck because everything's a priority. So then they go into overwhelm.
Okay.
Right? So it sound familiar. We've all been there, right?
Well, I've got a little mantra for myself that I've come up with in regards to this here. This is a processor, not a storage unit.
That's really good. I like that.
So I try to record things and organize them in a way that I can come back to them later. That's why I love Evernote. It's just a wonderful
Yes.
file cabinet type of thing. And there's that emotional component. Overload is just, I think that's really having too many things to do. But, you know, with leaders, there are leaders that can create that by over functioning or taking on too many things. How have you seen that impact some of the people that you're working with, as far as like maybe having an over functioning leader and under
Right.
functioning employees? And
Well, typically I find that when there's an over-functioning leader that the employees are under-functioning because it's creating that. I call it the accountability effect. So the leader feels like nobody's accountable.
Mhm.
And it's really because they're in their perfectionism, their micromanagement mode, and they're trying to do everything. And therefore the others kind of get apathy and are like, they're going to do it anyway. That's often what I see. But, you know, the people who are taking on that's where they're in that perfectionism, meaning that they can't let go of control of something. So they don't need to be overloaded. In most cases, they have teams or potential resources that they could reach out to be able to help them to delegate. But they don't want to delegate because they do it better, or, you know, the other person doesn't know, and it would be easier for me to just do it than to teach them. And so again, it's very tactical, short-term thinking.
Mhm.
Versus how much time could they free up for themselves over time so that they could do the more strategic work. So I find that that's where the overfunctioning gets caught up, because there are plenty of people who, you know, I'm a single mom. I'm involved in, you know, I have 2 kids who are, you know, somewhat teenage, just coming into their teenage years, very active in sports, got a lot to organize with them. I run my own business. I'm involved in other community affairs and activities, you know, end, right? And so, and you know, you want to have a relationship, so that's part of it, is spending time in your relationship. So we manage all of these things in our lives, and it doesn't have to be an overload. It's just how we approach it. And it does come back to setting the priorities, that not every day are you going to get to everything that needs, you know, that you can feel that everything that is urgent that needs to be done. So you need to have some criteria. We didn't quite talk about that in terms of prioritizing, but you need to have some criteria about what determines what pops to the top of the list. And so when you get clear on what that criteria is, and it depends on the circumstance of your life, those criteria could be around values, or they could be around, if you're looking for sales opportunities, you can't go after everything, right? You can overload yourself if you take on too big of a region, but if you strategically approach it, right, then you're being more resourceful, and you're changing that overload and not creating overwhelm. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes, breaking things down into smaller chunks that helps me. And
Yeah.
if I've got 3 to 5 things, and really no more than 5, but you know, 3 things that I absolutely must get done, and then kind of stick to that, and add more, of course, to other things, but those most important 3 is where I would look for myself. Where do you find the most resistance to people who are in that cycle?
Well, you know, you just said the top 3 things. So it's the excuses, right? You hear people say, well, I have more than 5 things. I can't do the top 3 to 5 things. I've got 10 things or 20 things, and there's no way around it. So it's just what I find is that most people are in that overwhelm place. And what happens in our brain when we get stressed and in that overwhelm is that our brain stops working effectively. We go into fight or flight or freeze mode, which means that we don't have access to the logical decision-making part of our brain. So that makes us more anxious and more, in that emotional space. And so the most important thing is to take a step back and to get a broader perspective. And again, that's why I talk about the 10 drivers, is so that people can take a step back and see where they are in all of them, and which one is the biggest hindrance for you right now, right? Maybe it's you don't have the time, so you don't do any planning. And so then you're in urgency mode because things fall apart, or you haven't planned accurately, so you need more resources than you thought, or it takes twice as long, or you know what I'm saying. So it's really getting to take a step back and to be able to see it from a logical perspective.
And I think that's really critical, is to get that other perspective. And that's where people like you and Ryan Roy, my accountability coach, come in, because we get too close to things and we get a little overwhelmed, and somebody can bring that outside perspective. It could be an accountability buddy. If you don't
Absolutely.
have resources to go out and hire a coach, you can get accountability buddies, accountability friends, people on the job. And so this has been a marvelous hour. We've done about a couple of minutes. And I've just started flipping through your book. I'm really looking forward to it. I've only got a few pages of a book I'm reading, and it seems to fit perfectly with what you've put in this book. And I'm looking forward to getting into those assessments and using some of those tools to see how they fit with my tools, and just another way to learn that your approach is so different and fresh. And so what are some closing thoughts that you want to leave our audience with as nonprofit leaders, for themselves and for their teams?
Well, I think as a closing thought, what I would urge people to do is understand that it's not about time, right? So and there's been studies at University of Pennsylvania where they actually studied stress and time and all of this, and I know we don't have time to go into it, but basically the the outcome is that the people who were quasi given back time weren't any less stressed or happy than the people that they actually gave more to, because it's how you show up for your time. So I would say, look at how you're managing your energy, how you're showing up for the time. And I would say to look at your excuses. You know, when you say, I don't have the time, or I can't do that, or whatever your excuses are, I would say challenge those excuses. Is that true? Right? Is it really true? What does that mean? Because, you know, I did this the other day, as I heard myself say I don't have the time, and then I said, wait, that means it's not a priority for me. And then I need to really question myself, why is this not a priority? And if it's not a priority, get it off my calendar altogether. And so by challenging ourselves, you can be your own coach, right? I mean, I'm not saying you don't need a coach. Everybody should have a coach, because it's better to get the outside perspective. But when possible, be your own coach and challenge yourself in those excuses, so that you can really get to the root of what's holding you back.
Well, thank you. That's marvelous. You know, and I know that priorities change and things do change, and there's a time to let go of things. And Seth Godin talks about that in the dip. But Penny, I really thank you very much for coming. I'd like to thank all of our friends out on Facebook who joined us this week. And thank Hugh again. Penny Zenker, thank you very much. The links for the book and for these wonderful tools that she's made available to us will be on the nonprofit chat page. So thank you very much again. I look forward to seeing you sometime soon.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Russ. It was great being here.